This is page number 27 from Routhledge English Women's Voices. So यहाँ पर कौन कौन से वुमेन इस एरा में कितना कितना लिखे हैं वो देखते हैं. पहला नाम है हमारा मैरी डे फ्रांस. सेकेंड, पहला नाम है हमारा मैरी डे फ्रांस. Mary de France, who was English, wrote in late 12th century. Late 12th century में वो लिखती थी was okay. She wrote in late 12th century, and her book was which she wrote. The book name was Leas. Okay, Lais. Leas. This was a very famous work, Leas, which contained a series of short romances based on unwritten Breton songs. Mary's was not by any means the only female voice of her time. One was from Saxons. Her name was Hotstovia. Okay, her name was Hotstovia. Hotsvi. Hotsovika. Okay, Hotsovitha. Okay. She was the 10th century from 10th century from the Saxons, and which is generally seen as the first woman writer in Europe. Her works as Ancri Vesi, also known as Ancrin Roll, a book of advice on how to live, directed first at nuns but clearly also to the wider relationship of women, became one of the main texts of 13th century, and it dates about 1225. So next writer is Christian de Plazin. Christian de Plazin. Okay, Christian de Plazin was from France. She was a full-time woman writer, a professional writer, and she was the first one to question on the authority of men's writing. Her book, known as The City of Ladies, in that she comments on the lamentations of Matthias. Okay, and there she also mentions about something about the Chaucer's Wives of Bath. Okay, she was the first lady from France who questioned upon the authority of man's writing. Okay, because women were scared. If women used to write, they used to write by anonymous names. Okay. So, a text by Christian de Plazin was translated by Anthony Woodville, and her moral proverbs of Christianity. क्रिश्चियनिटी. ओके, यहाँ क्रिश्चियन वाला हो गया. एक पहला हो गया मैरी डे फ्रांस, नेक्स्ट इज हॉट्सटोविक्था, एंड थर्ड वन इज क्रिश्चियन डे प्लाजन. क्रिश्चियन डे प्लाजन इज अ इम्पॉर्टेंट कैरेक्टर. इम्पॉर्टेंट है ये क्रिश्चियन डे प्लाजन, और बिकॉज शी वॉज द फर्स्ट फुल टाइम राइटर, प्रोफेशनल राइटर ऑफ फ्रांस. ओके, क्रिश्चियन डे प्लाजन का कुछ वर्क some women writing. हाँ, क्रिश्चियन डे प्लाजन का कुछ वर्क्स, सम ऑफ द वर्क्स ऑफ क्रिश्चियन डे प्लाजन आर इम्पॉर्टेंट, सच एज द टेल ऑफ द रोज, द बुक ऑफ द सिटी ऑफ लेडीज, which was criticized on misogamy and injustice of medieval France openly. Okay, और इसमें कुछ important नहीं है. If we read about Mary's Leas, it is a book of construction and devotion and for visionary writing. Okay, ये जो Leas है मैरी का बुक. इसके बाद एक और राइटर है जिसका नाम है मार्गरेट कैम्प. मार्गरेट कैम्प. ओके, वो she was a visionary writer, but also her original way as Christian D. Pleasant. She also wrote it originally. Okay, she also wrote originally, and she was dedicated to her work. Her work's name was The Book of Margaret Camp. This book, she didn't study much. Okay, she used to dictate her, or she used to say her stories, which were written down by two men, and that book's name was on her name, The Book of Margaret Camp. Next topic is fantasy. Okay, here the fantasy is the fairy or the fantastic world replaces the classical hero, classical hates. ये सब जो फेरी है या फिर फंटास्टिक वर्क्स है, इट रिप्लेसेस द क्लासिकल हेड्स in Sir Offro and Sir Gawain and the Green Knights. Sir Gawain is one of the knights of the round table. फैंटेसी या फिर फेरी, हम लोग को फेरी या फैंटेसी वो सब चीज़ें जो हम लोग को रियलिटी से दूर लेके जाते हैं, ओके, विच हेल्प्स अस एस्केप फ्रॉम रियलिज्म. सो यहाँ पर ये सब जो है, ये दोनों सर ऑफ्रो एंड सर गॉविन एंड द ग्रीन नाइट्स, ये सब फैंटास्टिक राइटर्स है, फैंटेसी राइटर्स, फैंटेसी वर्क्स है, वो पोएम्स है, जिसमें सर गॉविन इज़ वन ऑफ द नाइट्स ऑफ द राउंड टेबल. किंग which was the follower of King Arthur. Arthur was the ruler, if you remember, Celts के बाद जो ब्रिटेन में, okay, before Normans, before Anglo-Saxons. Say, oh, okay, so Arthur has always seen in layman's brute as the greatest and the English kings. एक fantasy writer, एक fantasy work है Brute, which was written by layman. This poem concentrates on one episode rather than on the whole story, and it opens up an ambiguous treatment of the chivalric code of truth and honor. This code is a part of courtly love ideal, with a chevalier being the ideal knight, whose behavior is a model to all. Okay? But यहाँ Sir Gawain and the Green Knights is subverted and made impossible by the Green Knights offering that his head be suck off as long as he strike to return blow in 1 year. Sir Gawain and the Green Knights, ये जो है, it's all end with 4.5 line conclusion in short lines, giving a rhythmic and narrative variation to the regular 4 stress line of many earlier works. Next is some travel poets. Anglo-Saxon का वर्क समय का ये, सिंपली नोन एज ट्रैवल, एंड पहला नाम उसमें है सर जॉन मैंडविले. ट्रैवल पोएट्स में है सर जॉन मैंडविले, MANDEVILLE. सर जॉन मैंडविले ये एक फ्रेंच हिस्टोरियन है, ओके, जो कि अलग अलग जगह ट्रैवल करके उन लोग के बारे में लिखते हैं. ही इज़ हाईली एंटरटेनिंग गाइड फॉर पिलग्रिम्स टू अ होली लैंड, बट गोज़ बियॉन्ड, taking the reader as far as Tartary, Persia, India, Egypt, recounting more fantasy than fact. Travel poets are those poets who travel from one place to another, looking at the beauties of ugliness, and they bring down in their work. Mandeville's book whetted the Western European readers' appetite for the travel book as a journal of marvels. Dry scientific detail was not what these readers wanted, rather in the imagination plus information. These were these are some of the qualities which readers demand. Okay, it's imagination plus information. Thus, the myth of the fountain of the youth and the gold dust lying around like ant hills caught the Western imagination and when the voyagers of the late 15th and 16th century found new worlds in America. In this topic only Mandeville is mentioned. हम लोग आगे चलते हैं और कुछ इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं है. Next is about Geoffrey Chaucer, which I have explained in my other video. So please do check it out. Geoffrey Chaucer हम इसमें नहीं explain कर रहे, but I'll name some of the books written by Geoffrey Chaucer, like the Canterbury Tales. The Book of the Duchess is a dream poem on the death of 1368 of Ballanche. Ballanche's spelling is Blanche. Okay. Duchess of Lancaster. She was the Duchess of Lancaster, the wife of John of Gaunt. This John of Gaunt was the friend of Chaucer, for whose wife this Book of Duchess was written. This Sir John of Gaunt is the third son of King Edward III. Chaucer in his life has seen the rule of three kings: Edward III, Richard II, and Henry IV. And Chaucer was the favorite of Edward III. Some words like Canterbury Tales, Book of Duchess, The House of Fame, The Divine Comedy. Okay, this Book of Duchess is a elegy. Canterbury Tales has 24 stories and it's an incomplete work. Okay, this work Chaucer wrote Canterbury Tales for 8 years, but then he died, so the work was not completed, but it still has 24 stories. Then there's a short poem by Chaucer which is known as Fortune. Chaucer also uses a rhyming technique which is rhyme royal, Royal. Okay, Chaucer uses this rhyming technique known as rhyme royal, and more works are Chaucer by Annie Lydia and Arctite, The Legend of Good Women, Taurillus and Cressidia, Dream Vision and Other Poems, The Parliament of Fulis. Okay, this Taurillus and Cressida was a work in which this rhyme royal technique was used. Other poets known as Langland, Gower, William Lidgett. William Langland has written The Pious Plowman, which is a satire. It's a poem recounting the series of dreams. Okay, the satire origin of English satire, looking back to the Latin of Genuine, is usually credited to Joseph Hall. Okay, 6 Books of Rhodes was written in 1598. Pious Plowman is a alterative poem. It's an alterative poem recounting the series of dreams with walking interludes to connect them. Okay, there's a character which is Long Will, the dreamer. He dreams, is the unfinding character and the main speaker. Pious enter to the narrative now and then as the kind of alter ego of Will. By the end, he becomes semi-divine. The divine tale of how England might be reformed and the truth in justice and behavior. There is also a character known as Duvill, a Cato or Duvill, leads to the disillusioned view of human nature, which is the church, which should exemplify salvation, are shown in corrupt. उसके बाद है, as the Canterbury Tales, the fairer is seen as weak and corrupt. The pyrer is seen as one who has its own dream, is an honest man. Sir Gower has also written some works. Grover is John Grover, and he has written Confesso Amantis. John Grover has written Confesso Amantis. Okay, it's a very famous work, this Confesso Amantis, written by John Grover. Paris Ploman. It's a love confession poem in which John Grover uses his human elements. Okay, this John Grover is a moral offense in the eyes of the church, and confession was the Roman Catholic Church's way of holding its belief and in a moral tie to the church, which could forgive and absolve sins as long as believers paid due to penance. Okay. Grover's confession, the Confesso Amantis. In this, the Grover's confession uses the concept with a degree of irony. He uses the stories to recount the 7 deadly sins of love, deriving considerable inspiration from the Latin poet Ovid. In a monk religious dream vision. At the end, when the speaker has confessed all his sins, he announces that he will renounce love, but only because he is old and nature has overtaken the capacity to love. Then there is a farewell to love rather than a vow of chastity in the ironic outcome. This is all here. Then there is a Scottish Chaucerian's medieval drama. These are not so important.